And now from Washington, the Inside Scoop. All the news the government does not want you to hear. Now, here's your host on the Inside Scoop, Mark Levine.
Good evening, America. Welcome to the Inside Scoop. The verdict is in: guilty, 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 and not guilty for Scooter Libby, the third most powerful man, if you will, in terms of the chain of command, a man who only reported to the president and the vice president, guilty on 4 counts: obstruction of justice and perjury, not guilty on 1 of the counts of providing false information. And the Republican Party, which used to say they believed in the rule of law and certainly wanted to impeach Bill Clinton for perjury, is now talking about pardon. You see, perjury isn't that big a deal to today's Republican Party, especially when it comes to outing a covert CIA agent to protect the president who's lying to the American people about war. Someone who may disagree with my assessment of the Scooter Libby verdict is sitting right beside me. His name is Phil Griffin. He's a Republican strategist. Phil, welcome to the Inside Scoop.
Thanks for having me.
Well, let me start about Scooter Libby. There is a growing number of people, the Wall Street Journal editorial page, senators like Senator Graham and Senator Lott, who are talking about pardon. Do you share in that assessment?
Well, my guess is, and we were talking before the show, that George W. Bush will grant several pardons as he leaves office towards the end of 2008 and 2009. I do not believe that he will grant as many pardons as a gentleman named Bill Clinton did as he exited, but I do believe that Scooter Libby will probably be one of the last pardons that George W. Bush grants.
I share your assessment. I mean, I think that's what he's going to do. He's going to wait till the American people have elected a new president, and then on his way out the back door, when there's no accountability, great time to get all his political cronies in. After all, this is a guy who is willing to lie and protect Vice President Cheney, outing a CIA agent, pretty severe stuff that his father called a traitorous act, and this is a president who wants to defend traitorous acts. Is that right?
Well, I disagree with your characterization that Scooter Libby outed Valerie Plame because he's not the one that provided the name initially.
Right, that was Dick Cheney.
He did give inaccurate statements to FBI agents that led them on what appears to have been a wild goose chase.
In order to cover up for Dick Cheney's traitorous act.
That's your opinion.
That is my opinion. Now, we don't know because the guy's lying. I mean, they asked him, you know, who told you? And he said, well, Dick Cheney told him. And they said, well, did Dick Cheney tell you to tell other people?
Well, I believe that if Fitzgerald, the special prosecutor, felt that Scooter Libby was taking the fall for somebody else, then that's some other person, be it Dick Cheney, Karl Rove, or any other person in the White House, would have been indicted at this point in time. And as I'm aware of at this point, there are no other indictments coming down.
Well, that's not necessarily so. As you know, the jury seemed to think he was the fall guy. But it's not necessarily so. What you do when you're a prosecutor is you go after the small fish and you put the pressure on them and you say, turn over, tell what the top guy did.
That's correct.
Now, Scooter Libby, if we were to put him in jail, he's going to be sentenced June 5th. And I really hope we'll see that the judge does not grant a stay, that the judge says, in effect, you're going to jail while your case is up on appeal. Then he may turn state's evidence against Dick Cheney. But the whole pardon scheme, what they can do is they can keep the balls up in the air for the appeal for 2 years. And then, just as he's about to go to jail, pardon him, and that way you can never catch the big fish Dick Cheney. Sounds like a pretty good conspiracy, doesn't it?
Well, it's a good conspiracy if you're a Democrat. I don't believe that he's going to get off the hook that easily. I believe that the judge in June will grant a partial stay, but I don't believe that they'll grant a complete stay and leave him out of jail or out of prison while his appeals go through the process. The reason
what do you mean by a partial stay?
I don't think that he's going to give him a free ride while his appeals are pending. I also think that the judge will look and see whether the appeals have any merit. If they appear to have no merit whatsoever, I think he'll go to jail immediately. If they appear to have some merit, I think that he'll delay it temporarily, but I don't think he's going to delay all of the sentencing appeals from 2007 through January of 2009. I just don't see that happening.
Well, I think he'll do sentencing on June 5th. The question is, will he stay the conviction, the serving time, pending appeal? I'm not sure what you mean by a partial stay.
I don't think he'll make him serve right away. again, depending on the strength of his appeal, but I do think that he will make him serve time between now and 2009 in January.
Here's what I'm trying to understand. If Republicans advocate the rule of law,
which we do,
and if Republicans don't think that Dick Cheney did anything wrong, then why not let the prosecutor prosecute this small fish that, after all, a jury's found beyond a reasonable doubt. He's actually not such a small fish, as we talked about. He only reported to Dick Cheney and George Bush.
Sure.
But put him in jail. If he squawks, and that's the way our process works. If he doesn't, then let him serve his time. Isn't by saying, Scooter Libby, we're going to keep you out of jail for 2 years, pardon you just at the last minute, and get you off scot-free. It sounds to me like they have a little deal going out here. And it's interesting. The Washington Post reported that Libby's defense team reached out to the White House through an intermediary to reassure the White House about his strategy. It sounds to me kind of like with Monica Lewinsky, where Bill Clinton wore that tie. Isn't Libby telling the White House, in effect, don't worry, keep me out of jail, and I won't finger Dick Cheney?
Well, you've got two separate parties involved here. One is the judge, who will do the sentencing in June, and the second one is George W. Bush, who in January of 2009 may exercise an executive pardon. So I don't know that there's any collaboration between the president and the judge.
Oh, I don't think there is.
There may be separate collaboration with both of them by Scooter Libby.
I don't think there is. I guess we differ in our assessment of the judge. I certainly hope, as you're suggesting, that the judge not do a stay pending appeal. In fact, if the judge puts Scooter Libby in jail pending the appeal, then I think the process can work, because then George Bush either has to pardon him, and all the American people can see his involvement in this scheme. After all, Watergate was not about the break-in so much as the cover-up. That's what Richard Nixon got in trouble for. So if Scooter Libby goes to jail, George Bush has two very unpalatable options. Either he can pardon Scooter Libby, and everyone can realize he's covering something up, or he can let him go to jail, and Scooter Libby, with the pressure of jail, may finger the vice president. So then I think justice can work. But if there is a stay pending appeal, and they keep him out of jail for 2 years and pardon him at the last minute, then there's no chance for us to know the truth.
It's interesting, in the same case, you had the member of the news media who served 7 or 8 months in jail,
Judith Miller,
for not turning over certain information, and at the end of 7 or 8 months in jail, information started coming forth.
Well, right, and that's exactly how the process is supposed to work. It is my point, but here's my question. At the end of the day, do you support a pardon for Scooter Libby?
I'm not a big fan of a pardon, but I believe that one will happen.
Okay, so you're on record then against a pardon, because then we can agree on that. I fear one will happen too.
Here's my view. My view is that on sentencing in June, Scooter Libby will receive a relatively light sentence compared to the 30 years plus that he could have received had he been convicted on all the charges and had he had a significant criminal history. I think he's looking at serving up to 2 or 3 years, and I frankly don't think that the judge in a nonviolent criminal system is going to make him serve even the 2 to 3 years. So my guess is that there will be a presidential pardon which will only be a couple of months at the end of his sentence.
See, but there's a number of assumptions here.
But
first of all, you're assuming the judge doesn't give him a stay pending appeal, that the judge puts him in jail.
I am assuming
which I'd really like to see, and I really hope, hey, judge, if you're listening, you got to put this guy in jail. We need some justice here. I agree it's going to be 2 or 3 years, not for the reasons you cited, but because that's what the federal guidelines say.
Right.
I mean, and judges generally follow, they don't have to, but they generally follow those guidelines. But I'm glad to hear you on record as opposed to a pardon, because I hear the Wall Street Journal and the Weekly Standard and Graham and Lott, they're talking about a pardon. I'm glad to see you're sticking up for the rule of law.
I have not heard a groundswell of Republicans at the grassroots level saying we need to pardon Scooter Libby. It just isn't out there. They're more focused on Iraq, they're more focused on the economy, and they're focused on the 2008 presidential elections. They view this as something that has happened, and the legal system will take care of itself.
Let me ask you a question. There was obviously a lot of criticism about Bill Clinton's lame duck pardons. There's a lot of criticism in advance about the possibility of Bush's lame ducks. Preemptive criticism. But, George Bush's father also was involved in a scandal, Iran-Contra scandal. We even had memos saying he was there. He said he was out of the loop. Caspar Weinberger could roll over on him, and of course Caspar Weinberger got his pardon in the last days of that presidency. The Constitution allows the President of the United States to pardon at will. That's here. After the Bill Clinton pardons, there was a coalition of Democrats and Republicans that talked about an amendment to the Constitution. And I'm not big on amending the Constitution in general, but here's one I think I could support. I want to see what you think. It's an amendment to the Constitution that says after the last election of the November, before a president's about to leave office, so it would only be a lame duck president. In other words, if he's reelected, it wouldn't apply, or she. But if you have a lame duck president, in effect, from the November of that election year to January 20th to the new president, for that 2-month period or so, no pardons can be issued. Would you support that amendment? Because I would.
I, like you, am not a big fan of amending the Constitution unless it's absolutely necessary, and I think it would be extremely difficult to do. Unfortunately, I don't think you would be able to do such a thing legislatively, which I think you would have.
You don't think so? I mean, the idea that says that a president serving 4 years can do pardons for 3 years and 10 months. A president serving 8 years can do pardons for 7 years and 10 months. They just can't do it when they're not accountable.
Right.
Doesn't that, I mean, I remember.
It makes sense.
I'm from Nashville, Tennessee. There was a time in the 1970s when there was a Democratic governor by the name of Ray Blanton, and he was selling his pardons to criminals. Literally, they were giving him money, and he was doing pardons. And it was right at the end, after he'd already been kicked out of office. Frankly, the time to impeach him, everyone would have impeached him, but there was no time to get it done. And this guy is literally selling pardons. And they found out in the Tennessee Constitution he had an absolute right to. And finally, they did something that was quasi-legal. They actually swore in the new governor, I think it was Lamar Alexander. They swore him in a few days early, which I don't even know if it was constitutional either, but to get this corrupt governor out of there. To me, this is a perennial problem. I mean, I don't like lame duck people issuing these pardons.
I know that when Bill Clinton was in office, the Republicans were very critical of a great number of both the substance of the pardons themselves and the individuals who did not deserve pardon, and just the sheer volume of pardons that occurred in that 8-week period of time.
And that seems to be
growing. Disturbing.
And George Herbert Walker Bush did it. Bill Clinton did it. These last 2 months becomes, pardon heyday. And actually, Scooter Libby, as you recall, was the lawyer for Mark Rich. Scooter Libby was the same guy that was pushing Mark Rich's pardon with Bill Clinton. So this is a guy who knows all about pardons and all about getting lame duck pardons. He's an expert at it. So I think that's what he's gunning for. So you're going to support me in my constitutional amendment?
I don't think it'll pass, but I think it's a good idea. I think they ought to try to do it legislatively.
When you say legislatively?
Get it passed through the House and the Senate.
But it has to be a constitutional amendment. You agree? I mean, I don't see how you can do it through simple legislation.
I think it's going to be extremely difficult to amend the Constitution on the issue of pardons.
Really?
Although I support it conceptually.
Well, maybe if it happens after Scooter Libby, we'll find out, right?
After we're gone.
Maybe if he does it, it'll happen. Let me ask you this. What do you think the administration, I mean, George Bush has not ruled out a pardon. What do you think he's trying to hide? Why is he so concerned about pardoning, the possibility of pardoning Scooter Libby?
My hope is that George W. Bush will spend more time focusing on the war in Iraq, focusing on the war on terror,
but why won't he say, I'm going to rule out a pardon?
And I think he ought to say, if it were me advising the president, I would tell him to say absolutely nothing about Scooter Libby. And if Tony Snow gets asked those questions, he ought to say, well, the matter's in court. As you indicated earlier, the rule of law ought to stand on these issues of perjury and obstruction of justice, and the judge is the one who will ultimately decide.
But that's not true.
If he gets overturned, then it will be an appellate court.
Well, that's fine, but what he could say right now, I'm going to respect the judge, I'm going to respect the jury, I'm going to respect the appellate court. I will not intervene at any time in the process.
I don't think you should say a thing.
Well, no, because it sounds to me like you want to leave an opening for him to do a pardon.
Well, because you and I believe that he will pardon him ultimately.
Well, I do, but I don't think it's a good thing. And I think that people advising the president need to recognize that basically it destroys all the Republican arguments, whether it's impeachment or rule of law or anything else, if this president lets go a guy who may hold the truth that we have the first vice president since Aaron Burr to commit treason. That's very serious stuff. It's a little more serious than an adulterous affair, and this is the guy covering up. So I hope the president makes clear that he will not issue a pardon. Folks, if you want to join in this discussion, it's easy to do. The toll-free number is 888-488-MARK, 888-488-6275. You can also comment on the blog at radioinsidescoop.com. We'll be right back after this. Yeah.
This is Mommy's bed. Me and Jenny were jumping on it. Mommy's gun fell on the floor. I was a cowboy. Bang, 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 bang. I said, Jenny, wake up, it's just pretend. But she wouldn't wake up. If you give me a fish...
If you give someone a fish...
You feed them for a day.
Teach someone to fish.
You feed them for a lifetime.
Give me a fish, and you'll feed me for a day. Teach me to fish, and you'll feed me for a lifetime.
Through Volunteers of America, you can help change lives in your community.
Oh, hey, mister, studied algebra in school and got a better job than I could. You take the last couple.
Oh, no, mister. Stuck in an entry-level job because you only learned basic math. I don't have a boss riding my butt like you do, so you take it so you can get back to your desk.
You know, I probably should, but maybe Miss AP Calculus with the $200 haircut in the big office upstairs would like a cup.
Oh, no, Mr. What was your name again? Never mind, it doesn't matter. I'm too busy doing important things to care. I just came down for some sweet and star.
You know, if my limited math abilities weren't keeping me from getting a better job, I'd quit this afternoon.
I don't blame you. But thank goodness you're stuck here because we really need someone to make the coffee.
Line it up, baby. Come on. Line it up, baby. Come on. Line it up, baby. Come on.
From Washington, back to the Inside Scoop with Mark Levine.
Welcome back to the Inside Scoop. My guest here is Phil Griffin. He's a Republican strategist. I'm Mark Levine, used to work for the Democrats. And we welcome calls from you to join in the debate. It's easy to do. Just dial toll-free 888-488-MARK. In talking about the Libby trial, one of the interesting things about it is the kind of insight it gave us into the Bush administration. People testified this was an administration that was obsessed about secrecy. They wouldn't even talk to each other. Ari Fleischer wouldn't be told, or Scott McClellan. None of them would be told what was going on. You even had Kathy Martin, who was a White House spokesman, not know that certain stuff had been declassified, and even that the president, in order to fight Wilson, had declassified a national intelligence estimate simply to try to go after a critic. I don't know what you think about all of this, but it seems to me that this is a White House that's more obsessed with how it's seen than actually doing the job of the American people.
I don't know that I'd agree with that assessment. As you were reading those descriptions, it sounded to me more like the Clinton administration than the Bush administration. But I think that you've got a number of administrations that are concerned about secrecy, about stuff being leaked to the media. In this particular case, you have the war on terror, you have the war in Iraq, and they are very concerned about secrets being leaked.
Yeah, but okay, in the Libby trial, we have news media advisors frozen out of decisions about how to respond to a crisis, colleagues kept from one another which reporters they talked with, and the president declassifying parts of a highly significant national security document without the knowledge of his chief of staff. Should the president be declassifying a document just to respond to a critic?
I don't believe that should be the sole purpose of declassifying a document. I mean, I do see, and I do understand, having worked in Washington and Richmond, that you have policy people making decisions and doing research, and then you have media and press release people, and the left hand may not know always what the right hand is doing at any one given time, particularly given the number, hundreds of thousands of federal employees that are all doing different jobs in Washington or outside of Washington.
Yeah, but when you have the policy people, Cheney personally directing his staff to watch every television news show that mentioned him. I don't know whether that includes Jon Stewart or not, but I wouldn't be surprised. And to really, it says each witness would give details of this zeal to manipulate the public image. Thomas Blanton, director of the National Security Archive at George Washington University, says that the Cheney office seems to have raised information hoarding to a real fine art. I mean, you had cases where Rice didn't know what Libby was doing, and Libby didn't know what Hadley was doing, and Hadley didn't know what Ari Fleischer was doing, and none of them knew what the vice president was doing. It sounds like this is an administration that doesn't even trust each other?
Well, it also goes to this issue about whether or not Scooter Libby obstructed justice or lied to FBI agents if nobody knew what the heck was going on, if the left hand didn't know what the right hand was doing. As I understood the comments from the jurors in their assessment of the Bush administration, it took them 9 days to deliberate over 5 relatively small criminal charges, and they had a very difficult time doing it and put it up sticky notes all over the wall just to try to figure out what was going on. So I don't disagree that it wasn't confusing, but I'm not at all surprised that some higher level people may not know entirely what the President, Vice President, or the Secretary of State are doing at any given time, all the time.
Well, you say, of course, they're relatively small criminal charges. Are you saying perjury is a relatively small criminal charge?
It's still a felony, but if you compare it to some of the other federal charges that are out there, you cannot receive the capital punishment or death penalty.
Do you think it's an impeachable offense?
Well, it was an impeachable offense according to Congress back in the 1990s.
I'm asking what you think.
I thought that it was an impeachable offense based on the level of perjury that occurred.
So perjury, when it relates to whether someone is sleeping around, that's an impeachable offense. What about perjury? I mean, Dick Cheney and George W. Bush both talked to investigators. Mm-hmm. They both gave statements under oath. If Scooter Libby turns on Cheney, they can try Cheney for perjury.
They could.
And this isn't perjury about who he slept with. This is perjury about outing a CIA agent, which George Herbert Walker Bush called a traitorous act. Surely that would be an impeachable offense, if proven. If
proven, and although they've had the special prosecutor and investigators for a number of years, and the only criminal charge that they have been successful on that I'm aware of is the Scooter Libby charge, and Dick Cheney, and there's nobody else in the administration that has either been charged, has threatened to be charged. As I understand it,
it's a sealed indictment.
I mean,
Karl Rove is on the hook. I think Vice President Cheney's still on the hook. You heard Patrick Fitzgerald say to the jury, there's a cloud on this administration. Clearly, he was referring to Vice President Dick Cheney. I mean, Scooter Libby only reported to 2 people. So it's either Bush or it's Cheney. And he's covering up for someone. I mean, he's lying under oath. Why do you think Scooter Libby committed perjury? Who's he lying for? There's only 2 people he reports to. Who's he lying to protect?
Let me answer the question this way. I don't know who he's lying to protect, and I'm not sure whether he was lying or whether he was confused. You and I had talked about...
Jury says beyond a reasonable doubt he was lying.
That's what the jury said.
Right.
I think if you asked a number of Americans, although they didn't follow it as closely, it was a confusing trial given the number of players that were involved. If I had been the defense attorney, I would have put Scooter Libby on the witness stand. And I think
never would have happened.
I think that...
he would commit more perjury.
Well,
then you have more counts.
I think that he would have gotten off... I think the one charge he would have had the most difficulty getting off of would have been the obstruction of justice charge. I think he would have gotten out of the perjury charges, but by relying on third-party witnesses to testify for him, then have his defense attorney represent to the judge and the jury that they were going to put Scooter Libby on the stand, and then never to do it during this months-long trial, I think killed the defense attorney's credibility, and it killed Scooter Libby's credibility. He had none, and they held that against him.
They also said they're going to put Dick Cheney on the stand, and what they did is they got rid of more than 90% of the jurors who said, well, we can't trust what Dick Cheney has to say. Sounds like that was just a ruse to get rid of more liberal jurors in a way to get a more conservative audience, because we all knew, at least I never thought from the outset, that either Dick Cheney or Scooter Libby would dare testify. If Cheney testifies, that's a clear perjury trap. Because the guy is going to lie under oath. That's what Dick Cheney does. He lies all the time. So he's going to lie here, and then he's in real trouble. So it was clear to me Dick Cheney would never testify. You know, look, you and I are lawyers. We know the Fifth Amendment. We know that you have a right not to testify to avoid self-incrimination. But we also know that if you've got a criminal client who's innocent, you're more likely to put him on the stand.
I agree with that.
So the fact that he didn't testify suggests that... I mean, we can't, as a juror, we can't take that into consideration.
But
as lawyers, we can say, here's the thing. 9 times, the jury said, he was either told or told someone about Valerie Plame Wilson's status as a covert agent. 9 times. At one point, he said it was true on a Tuesday and then denied remembering it on a Thursday. And So they seem pretty compelling. They believe Tim Russert. In fact, the only reason they waited for 9 days apparently was because of this fifth count, the one where they found him not guilty. That's the one they spent most of the time on. It sounds like a pretty compelling case. I mean, you disagree?
I disagree. And well, as I said, I probably would have handled the trial a little bit differently. I would have put Scooter Libby up on the stand. I think that would have taken care of some of these issues. If you don't remember what you said on Tuesday, on Thursday, that doesn't surprise me. I couldn't tell you what I said last Saturday. But that doesn't make me a perjurer, and that doesn't make me a criminal.
It does if 9 times this comes up. If your boss is obsessed and is writing articles on it, get Joe Wilson, and is giving you lists to tell the press and telling you exactly who to talk to at what time and giving you all these details, and your boss is the Vice President of the United States and he's determined to take Joe Wilson down, and you talk all about it on Tuesday and then someone says on the Thursday, I mean, this is 9 times. You really think Scooter Libby was just innocently forgot all about Joe Wilson?
I think that the volume of the number of times that he was given this information is difficult to believe, but do I think that he was malicious and intentional in his statements to the FBI? If he didn't have a whole heck of a lot of notes on it, whether or not it was Tuesday or Thursday that he was told that, I think those were things that he could have pointed out to the jury that would have been to his benefit.
Phil, what do you think happened? I mean, actually happened. To me, it's very simple. The president wants to lie about Saddam Hussein getting nuclear weapons because, frankly, it's very hard to get the American people to focus on Iraq. They're focused on Afghanistan and al-Qaeda and the people who murdered 3,000 Americans. So to turn their focus, there's got to be a nuclear link. They see this document come in, and they send someone out to check it out. Turns out to be a forgery, and now they're in trouble because that's all they've got is this one document that turns out to be a forgery. So Joe Wilson, the president says in his speech, it's all true.
Right. Joe
Wilson comes out and says, no, it's all false, and I told you it's false, and they're determined to get Joe Wilson. That's all pretty much undisputed. So, and it's clear they want to point out that his wife is a secret agent because they want to claim there's some nepotism here. Do you really think that Cheney didn't tell Libby to spread this around news agencies? You really think that didn't happen? If so, what do you think happened?
Well, as I recall the timeline, you have to throw in Richard Armitage,
right?
And he's the one who released the name Valerie Plame to the press. That Scooter Libby was not the one who
he did too. They all did.
They all did it.
But Armitage did it, Libby did it, Rove did it, and Ari Fleischer did it.
And Bob Novak wrote an article on it.
Yes, he did. But do you really think that Cheney didn't tell Libby to do this?
I don't know what Cheney told Libby to do.
He told him to go get Joe Wilson.
Well, I mean, that evidence may have come out in court, but it didn't.
Let me give our listeners a chance to join the discussion. The toll-free number is 888-488-MARK, 888-488-6275. What do you think is going on here? Is this innocent? Is it a cover-up? Is this worse than Watergate? Or is this just some minor thing that we all need to let pass? Let me know what you think. 888-488-MARK or comment on the blog at radioinsidescoop.com. We'll be right back after this.
Some people in Fairfax County don't know what public access means.
Some think it's just another channel on the dial.
But it's much more than that.
It's the voice of the people.
People like you.
Your neighbors,
your friends,
or your family.
People who want to share ideas,
opinions,
cultures, lifestyles,
art,
sports, music,
events,
entertainment,
history,
science,
beliefs.
People who want to learn about television,
producing,
directing,
cameras, audio,
lighting,
editing, or radio, talk, music.
Whatever you think people should hear.
Public access is the place where everyone has a voice.
And it's the place where that voice gets heard.
A place where you can create your own form of personal expression.
So what do you want to say?
Whatever it is.
You can say it here.
Because we're public access.
For the people.
By the people.
It is about balancing our choices between the gray of the concrete jungle and the stunning beauty of the real one, between a stoic facade of granite and the fury of the canyon. It's why there's EarthShare, the simple way to find balance. EarthShare is the workplace giving program bringing the leading environmental groups under one umbrella. Support EarthShare, support them all. EarthShare. Please ask your employer about workplace giving. To learn more, visit our website.
Thousands of kids in this country have everything it takes to go to college, except the money. The United Negro College Fund. A mind is a terrible thing to waste.
From Washington, back to the Inside Scoop with Mark Levine.
Welcome back to the Inside Scoop. This is, of course, not the first Vice President of the United States in trouble. It may be the most powerful Vice President ever in American history, Dick Cheney. After all, George Bush chose him to pick the Vice Presidents, and he picked himself. But we certainly have questions in the past about Vice Presidents, Presidents, and pardons, the most famous being Ford and Nixon. And we have a comment on the blog that writes, Mike writes, "Pardons are good for the United States. We are all human and we all make mistakes. To eliminate the pardon after a certain point in their presidency is a change in the balance of power between Congress and the administrative branches. 30 years ago, President Ford pardoned Nixon, and the JFK Center honored Ford with a profile of courage." Well, Mike, I wasn't aware of the JFK Center honoring President Ford. The only thing that was courageous about it, I guess, is that it happened before his lame duck session of his term. Maybe he had to do it quickly because he still had a number of years left in his term. But I couldn't disagree more to call that a profile in courage. When you have a president of the United States breaking the law, to me, that person has to be held even more accountable. And after Nixon resigned under threat of impeachment, if we're going to say we're not going to go after the president of the United States because he was president, we're going to go after, you know, somebody that robbed a liquor store, or we're not going to go after the president of the United States, that to me is exactly the opposite, I think, of a standard we need. We should hold him to a higher standard. You agree?
I agree that we should hold the President of the United States to a high standard, but I also agreed with Ford's pardoning of Nixon in that particular case.
Why?
I think it was the right thing to do at a very difficult time in our country's history.
How was it the right thing to do to let all those people get off scot-free, particularly the president?
Well, I think we're talking only about Richard Nixon.
Okay, why should we let him get off scot-free?
And even though he did what he did, the rest of those guys, whether it was G. Gordon Liddy or others, ended up serving jail time.
He got, didn't Ronald Reagan commute Liddy's? I think Ronald Reagan gave Liddy a pardon. I mean, after he'd served some time.
Right.
It seems to me this idea that political criminals are less dangerous than other criminals is really not a good thing, particularly when we have a president and a vice president that really don't seem to care much about the rule of law, totally apart from Scooter Libby. We find out that the FBI has been lying to Congress about the Patriot Act use. They said that, oh, it wasn't ever used without a warrant, and it turns out that there's tens of thousands of times they used it without a warrant. We know about the spying on American citizens, 250 million Americans. We know about sending people abroad to be tortured. It seems to me this is an administration that needs to follow the Constitution a bit more and needs to respect the law.
Well, if there are violations of the law, I'm sure that the Democrats and the Washington Post and New York Times will find it out, and that we will go prosecute those violations.
Well, it hasn't happened. I mean, they spied on 250 million Americans. No one's prosecuted that. They've tortured people abroad. One of the reasons, let me suggest to you, why prosecutors are afraid to go after the President of the United States or the Vice President is because they'll be fired. We had 8 prosecutors who were prosecuting low-level Republican corruption, people like Duke Cunningham, who got all those bribes in San Diego, and they were fired for looking after Republicans. So isn't this a case where the president can do just what Richard Nixon did and say, hey, don't both prosecute me, I'll fire you?
Well, I don't know that Bush would be prosecuted for any of the things that you've mentioned.
Well, I think he should be. I mean, the Fourth Amendment, right? I'll bring up my Constitution again.
Sure.
Searches and seizures, right? You have the right to be private. Your papers and persons, I'll get to the right thing. The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause. That just didn't happen.
And is this the issue down at Guantanamo Bay?
Well, no, I'm talking about the spying on Americans' telephone calls. I'm talking about the FBI issuing the warrants under the Patriot Act.
And the spying on the phone calls, as I understand it, is only from potential terrorists calling from overseas into the United States.
There were 250 million Americans. Now, unless you're telling me that 5 out of every 6 of us are potential terrorists, that's obviously not just potential terrorists.
Well, you and I aren't potential terrorists, so I'm not
but
sure
I've been spied on, I'm sure, because virtually everyone, unless you had Quest, You were spied on. They have your records. They know whether I called my mother on Mother's Day, and you know I'm glad I did, but that's my business.
But I don't believe that they're looking for criminal information if you call your mother on Mother's Day.
What the FBI, what came out from the Inspector General, is that the FBI would gather up all this information that was completely irrelevant to any criminal case. Now, they're supposed to destroy it, but they didn't destroy it. They kept it around. They kept it in databases. They have records on all of us. Frankly, this is what the Soviet Union and East Germany used to do. It isn't what the United States of America should be doing. And this is under the president signing, you know, go ahead and do it without warrants. A lot of people are calling now for Attorney General Gonzalez to resign. Chuck Schumer's made that call, third Democrat in the Senate, because of the torture and the phone calls and the FBI and misuse of the Patriot Act and hiding people at Guantanamo Bay without trial and secret prisons. Is it time for Attorney General Gonzalez to resign?
No.
What about all that?
We disagree. I think that I don't have any problem. I know a number of these cases have been through the court system, and to my knowledge, there haven't been any criminal findings. And that's, if there aren't any criminal findings, then people shouldn't be put in jail or resign from office.
One of the reasons why this hasn't gone as high up in the courts, of course, is that the administration refuses to let it go to the courts. I mean,
they can issue a subpoena and
no
get it done.
habeas corpus. Well, Congress can issue a subpoena now.
Congress could. You got a democratically controlled Congress. They could do it. You have prosecuting attorneys. They could do it.
To subpoena Attorney General Gonzalez.
You could subpoena any, whether it's phone records that you want, whether it's detainee and Guantanamo Bay records, and that was one of the cases that went up to the Supreme Court a couple of years ago. I mean, you could get these records. It's not like you and I don't get our cell phone records every month, and they can't be subpoenaed by Congress.
I certainly hope. And I certainly expect Congress to look into this. I mean, they've actually been in office less than 2 months. People forget. They think they've been there a long time, maybe a little over 2 months, the Democratic Congress. And before we focus on the elections of 2008, let's focus on what we can do. We need to subpoena those things. And this administration, it's interesting, when Gonzalez's aides were going to be subpoenaed to find out about all those Republican prosecutors they fired that were going after Republican corruption, Gonzalez changed his tune. He actually turned around and said, all right, I agree with changing the law back to the way it was before, where courts choose prosecutors when Congress and the president can't agree. So the subpoena is a powerful thing, and I hope the Democrats use it, and I'm glad to hear you support that too.
It's what they can use, and I think that they should. If they believe that there is legitimate corruption, they should go after them.
Well, good. I agree with you. Let me switch gears a bit to Halliburton. Halliburton, of course, is Dick Cheney's old company. He used to run it. He still gets money from it.
Prior to 1999.
That's right. Prior to becoming vice president, Halliburton has gotten a great deal of taxpayer largesse. Your money, my money, a heck of a lot of it's gone to Halliburton, often in no-bid contracts. They don't even have to bid for it. They just get our tens of billions of dollars. There's a lot of waste that's come from Halliburton, been documented by the Army. Now Halliburton has said that they're going to move their headquarters from Houston, Texas to Dubai. I think it's a tax avoidance scheme, but even worse than that, and they claim it isn't, but even worse than that, here's a company that our vice president used to control, still has an interest in, a company that received tens of billions of dollars from the American people, saying in effect, we got your money, goodbye. I mean, the Democrats are calling for hearings on this. They're stunned. They want to stop it. What's your view?
Well, I'd love to see Halliburton stay in the United States. I'd love to see him move to Virginia and become one of our taxpayers here. But I think they technically can move wherever they want to. Yeah, they've received lots of money, and as you said, in many of those are in no-bid contracts.
Right.
Which means that there was nobody else that wanted to do it or had the ability to do it or the
capacity to do it. Or
they
happened to know the vice president, so they got the no-bid contract.
Well, I don't think Dick Cheney is picking government contracts out.
Oh, you don't?
Well, Dick Cheney was last with him in 1999 and then resigned and ran as vice president of the United States.
Dick Cheney had a secret energy commission that to this day we still don't know which companies were represented, and he refuses to tell us. Since he's been vice president, we do know the energy companies have done very, very well under this administration. It's not that far-fetched to say that Dick Cheney, who refuses to talk about all his discussions with people like Halliburton, is funneling money to his old company.
I don't believe that he's in the government accounting office selecting who does There have been hundreds of contracts that Halliburton has received, and to my knowledge, Dick Cheney hadn't signed a one of them on behalf of the United States.
He doesn't have to sign it. You know how the process works. It's not that simple.
It works through a different office other than Dick Cheney's office.
Yeah, but it works through, at the time, Republicans in Congress were the ones controlling the government accounting office, controlling where the contracts went. Much of it was written into legislation. They controlled Congress. They knew on which side the bread was buttered. They wanted to give money to people who would then funnel the money back to them in campaign contributions. You don't see it that way.
I don't see it that way. As I recall, one of the larger contracts, there were only 2 bidders, and there was an uproar that the other company that was bidding against Halliburton was a foreign corporation. And so there was, I don't want to say preferential treatment, but that the American people, as I understood it, preferred to have Halliburton receive the contract rather than a foreign company do it.
Well, certainly we don't want, I mean, Dubai, it's interesting,
the Dubai
is the
port
exact
deal
same
is a perfect
company,
example.
Right, where the administration wanted Dubai to actually take over the security of our ports. But to say that there was no other, I mean, look, when you do a no-bid contract, okay, that doesn't mean that no one else can apply. If only one company can apply, you put it up for bids. One company applies, it's Halliburton, that's fair. A no-bid contract says, sorry, we don't care who can apply, we're giving it to Halliburton and nobody else. They took tens of billions, it may be over 100 billion now, of your and my taxpayer dollars. That's a lot of money. That's, folks, that may be 10% from your taxes went to Halliburton. Whatever it was, and now they're taking our money, they're going to run to Dubai, and they're going to avoid taxes from some clever lawyers. Don't you think Dick Cheney, as Vice President of the United States, should say to Halliburton publicly, I used to control you, I still get money from you, this is wrong, Halliburton, I challenge you not to do this?
I don't know that it's in his place to say something like that. I mean, he has no control over the company. He may have an opinion about whether they should stay in Houston or whether they should move to Dubai. If he made that opinion,
people would follow it.
And my guess is that his private, personal opinion is that they should stay in the United States of America, whether it's Houston or somewhere else.
Shouldn't he express that publicly?
I don't know that he should.
Why not?
I just don't think it's part of the Vice President's agenda to dictate where companies set up their corporate headquarters. He may have his opinions, he may be able to do something behind the scenes, but I don't think that they should tell Philip Morris, NASCAR races, or Halliburton where they should be conducting their business.
Do you think outsourcing is a problem in the United States?
I think outsourcing has been beneficial to the United States.
Really? How has it been beneficial?
I think you have companies that are having a difficult time making money in the United States, are able to set up employment areas in China or India where they're able to be more productive, hire more people to answer service calls or do manufacturing work that would be difficult to do and more expensive in the United States.
Is it good American public policy to decrease jobs for American workers and increase jobs for Indian workers? Is this something that we need to see more politicians do, support the firing of American workers and moving jobs overseas?
Well, I think if you look at the unemployment rate in the United States right now, it's down around 3%, which is essentially perfect employment. So that if we had 20% unemployment,
so nobody
in the
wants
United
these
States,
jobs in America.
Well, I don't
That's
know
what
that
you're saying.
I'm
Nobody
not
wants
saying,
to call centers.
I'm not saying nobody wants
Maybe
these
they don't
jobs.
want it for a wage of $1 an hour. Maybe they don't want it for a wage of 20 cents an hour.
Correct.
And these companies, when they're outsourcing abroad, are not only outsourcing American jobs, they're also outsourcing taxes. Corporations are paying less taxes now than they ever have before in American history. So when Halliburton moves to Dubai, they're going to get rid of a lot of taxes, not that they pay much anyway. Now, clearly that has to concern you. It's a matter of public policy.
If they move their corporate headquarters and all of the tax, burdens that go with that out of the country, then that would be a huge concern. But as I understood it today when they made the announcement, Halliburton was going to continue to keep its headquarters partially in Houston and was going to continue to pay taxes in the United States.
Yeah, we'll see.
And they were going to move part of it over to, as you've said, we'll see. But
we'll
that's
see.
That's
I think
what
some
I've
clever
heard.
lawyers are going to do something about that. Folks, if you want to join in the discussion, it's not just about Phil and me. It's about you joining in. The toll-free number is 888-488-MARK. 888-488-6275. You can also comment on the blog at radioinsidescoop.com. When we come back, I want to talk about the Democratic plan to get out of Iraq.
History has demonstrated that violence only begets greater violence. And injustice only begets greater injustice. This is not the tradition of our great nation. This is not how we want the United States to be known around the world. We have another tradition that we think ought to prevail. One that is more just and more powerful. There is a better way. If we truly want peace and security, then we must work hard for justice.
If you're concerned that we've become a nation whose national policies are grounded in beliefs that are centered on a line embedded in BS, then don't miss Escape from Orwellianation, a talk show in which concerned regular citizens like you and me, not self-serving media spinmeisters, wade through the barrage of newspeak and doublethink that pollutes public discourse today. Big brother, big business, big media, and the big national parties who collude to keep we the people afraid and in the dark would prefer that you not watch. Show them who's in charge. Tune in to Escape from Orwellianation right here on Channel 10.
From Washington, back to the Inside Scoop with Mark Levine.
Welcome back to the Inside Scoop. Well, in the coalition of the willing, apparently there's only one nation that's still willing. It's ours. For a long time, we had about 90% American troops there, about 10% British troops. All other troops put together were less than 1%. It was really an American and British effort. Now the Brits have left. They say, that's it, America, you're on your own. The Democrats say we need to leave too. We need to have certain guidelines. If Iraq can abide by them, terrific. If not, it's time to leave. The only people who want to stay the course are in your party, Phil. Why the heck are we there if even the British have said, you know what, it's time to leave?
Well, I don't think the British and the Danish have entirely said it's time to leave. They've said it's time to start pulling our troops out.
Right.
And they're still leaving several thousand troops there. At this point in time, as I recall, about 5,000 British troops are going to stay.
I don't think so. I think they're all going. It's my understanding.
Okay. But I don't think it's time to leave within the next 2.5 months. I think that's sort of a false guideline. I think that we ought to stick with a plan.
Well, the Democrats, actually, the plan is that they're putting forward, and it actually was hard to kind of round up all the disagreeing Democrats together. But the idea is that we'll leave by August 2008. There's certain guidelines that have to be met at each point in 07 and so forth, and we start to withdraw them, but we're fully gone by August 08. If we couldn't achieve Iraq in the time that it took to win in World War II, if we can't achieve some kind of peace there, maybe we should see that we're part of the problem and not part of the solution.
I think that we are part of the solution, and my hope is that we will stay there until the job is finished.
So 10 years, 20 years, 50 years,
I don't think it'll take that long. My guess is that they'll have them out of there in 2 years.
In 2 years? Well, that's the Democratic plan. So you support the Democratic plan?
Well, I don't support the Democratic plan. The Democratic plan is a series of withdrawals between now and 2008.
Right, and benchmarks to be met so that if they need them there, they're there until August 08.
And so the question for the Democrats is, if those benchmarks are not met, will they keep the troops there?
No.
I think you've seen in recent weeks that the surge of new troops that the Bush administration has put in Iraq has actually stabilized the area.
Stabilized the area? I mean, we hear bombs going off every day, hundreds of people being killed every single day. We have more than 1,000 people, a million people have left the country seeking elsewhere. We have Al-Qaeda growing in Iraq that wasn't in Iraq at all before this war. They're there now. We have Iran's power growing in Iraq. And we have the United States arming groups connected with both al-Qaeda and Iran. And now this is stabilizing the area?
What I hear in the news is that the surge, the new troops that are over there are helping to stabilize the area.
What are you watching, the Fox Propaganda Channel?
Of course.
Oh, well, you know.
I find it difficult to believe that all of the Iraqis have left, but that the al-Qaeda are still there.
Well, 1 million, not all of them.
But
it's still a significant
good number.
It's the people who are looking for peace. It's the people, it's the middle class, it's the moderates, it's the people who weren't divided into the Shiites and the Sunnis. Now, it's kind of like a gang war, and the Iraqis have to choose sides. And our troops are in the middle of all this.
Well,
what do we hope to accomplish?
The alternative would be to leave, turn the country over to Iran and al-Qaeda and the terrorists, and let them set up shop unfettered, and to just put on helmets in the United States and pray for peace. And I don't see that as a viable alternative. I think that we need to take the war to the terrorists, that we have done a good job over the last several years. Yeah, we've lost some men, some good men and women over there, but we've also accomplished a lot.
What have we accomplished?
Well, we've held free and democratic elections over in Iraq several times. We have a government that's in place. And we have a variety of areas of the country.
I can name any number of countries on earth that have had elections and descended into anarchy.
Sure they have.
So
this isn't one of them.
I mean, you know, Adolf Hitler was elected back in Germany.
By one vote, that's right.
So, you know, let's not pretend that's a solution. Elections are a means to an end. Look, here we have in Iraq. We have Iran, which I admit is dangerous, and we have al-Qaeda, which is dangerous. We don't like either of them. They're both dangerous. But they hate each other. They want to kill each other. If my enemy wants to... No, you know, I disagree. I think they hate each other more. I think the Shiites in Iraq that want to kill the Sunnis in Iraq and the Sunnis that want to kill the Shiites, if we take our troops out of the middle, they'll kill each other. Look what happened to Iran and Iraq in the 1980s. Brutal war. 1 million people dead. They killed each other. They didn't focus on us. If our enemies hate our enemies, why shouldn't we let them fight each other?
Maybe we should, but
I think we should.
My view is the United States ought to play a role over there helping to establish a free democratic government in Iraq, which is what we've done for the last several years, and that we ought to stay and protect them.
It's what we've done for the last several years. That's what Iraq has now, a free democracy. Everything's just peachy keen in Iraq.
I didn't say it's peachy keen. There are certain very small segregated areas that have lots of violent activity.
Like Baghdad, the capital.
Like
small,
Baghdad.
Segregated area. Well, happens to be, you know, a third or so of the population.
But if you look at 95% of the country, there doesn't appear to be a whole lot of activity going on out there.
There's the Anbar province, but it's also because of ethnic cleansing. Let's face it. The Shiite areas are devoid of Sunnis. There's no one to kill. The Sunni areas are devoid of Shiites. The ethnic cleansing is going on in the capital right now. Both sides are killing each other, and all we do is stand in the middle. Actually, to some extent, we're helping the Shiites do the killing because the government is controlled by the Shiites. They're connected with Muqtada al-Sadr, and we're literally helping them do some of their ethnic cleansing. This can't be the right thing to do.
Well, I certainly haven't heard that in the news media, that we're taking sides in the Iraq war or among the Iraq
Let me tell you how we are.
Groups.
The government is elected by the Shiites. They are the majority of the population.
Right.
The government has strong connections with Muqtada al-Sadr. In fact, it's only because of al-Sadr that this government of Maliki is even in place. Sadr is out to do Shiite death squads. He's also out to kill Americans. And what are we doing? We're helping the government do that. So we go after the Sunnis, but when we want to go after the Shiites, ooh, we have no back. Instead of doing this government's dirty work for them, why can't we pull to the borders, this is the Democratic plan, and allow the government and the Sunnis, hopefully they'll work something out. If they do, terrific. But if they're not going to work something out, it's not going to change a year or 2 or 5 years from now.
I just don't think the solution is hopefully the Shiites and the Sunnis will work something out, because they haven't done it for decades.
So why do you expect they're going to do it in 2 years if we're there? We've been there for 5 years, they haven't done it. We could be there for 50 years, and Shiites and Sunni Muslims wouldn't magically work out their differences.
Well, I mean, as I said earlier, I think that my guess is that the Bush administration will keep troops over there in the amount that are currently there, and will keep them there up through. That's exactly right, and we'll keep them there up through and after the 2008 election.
Right.
My guess
Right.
is that the Republican Party will pick a nominee president and vice president who had very little to do with the war in Iraq, and that narrows the list of names down to Romney, Giuliani, and Thompson.
Chuck Hagel.
And Hagel, who
Who's
is
against
opposed to
the
the
war.
Iraq war.
But aren't you really saying that George Bush is going to run out the clock? This is a guy who has staked his whole presidency on Iraq. Sure, we've had 3,000 Americans dead, and maybe another 2,000 will die. Maybe another 30,000 will be wounded. We have the highest wounded ever in American history as a percentage of casualties. But you know what? I don't want to be blamed for going in and pulling us out. I want the Democrats to be blamed for that. So if a few more thousand Americans have to die or a few more 100,000 Iraqis, I'll run off the clock to January 09. Isn't that what he's doing?
I don't see another 2,000 deaths in the next 18 months. But I could be wrong.
I hope I'm wrong.
But I see that the Americans will make further progress in the areas, those small areas like Baghdad, where there's a problem, and they'll go in and clean it up. They won't clean up everything. They won't make it perfect, but they'll make it livable.
2 months after this war started, the president goes on a battleship and declares mission accomplished. Since that time, they've always said, we're making progress, we're making progress. You have Dick Cheney saying, 3 years ago now? They're in the last throes. Every time the administration says we're making progress, it gets worse and worse and worse. Frankly, Saddam Hussein's Iraq was a paradise compared to Iraq now. And I'm not saying Saddam Hussein's Iraq was a paradise. I'm just saying people have less access to jobs, less stability, less everything than they do today.
But I think they have greater infrastructure. They have access to education. They have access to utilities that they didn't have.
They do? Again, I don't know if you're watching the Fox propaganda channel, but the Iraqis want us out. The great majority wants us out. If we believe in democracy, we follow them. And from what I read, unemployment has skyrocketed from being the 3% or so that we have in the United States to being over 50%. Farmers can't even plant their crops. It's in total chaos there. So I don't know, maybe Fox is showing you, 3 people who are happy. But listen, it's a democratic country. Shouldn't we respect its democratic majority, and they want us to leave, get out?
If the Iraqis want us to leave and they are able to defend themselves, then the Americans should certainly consider honoring their wishes. I think that will happen in the next 2 years.
You think they'll ask us to leave?
I think it will be a combination of, number one, as you've suggested, mission will be accomplished more so than it is now. Number two, the Iraqis will want us to leave. And number three, the Bush administration will be over.
Well, number one, the Iraqis already want us to leave. Apparently Maliki was pushed really hard to get us to stay. We're building permanent bases there. We have a new Iraqi oil law to give all our oil companies sweet oil deals, but at the same time, the GIs that are fighting and dying, they bear the brunt. And after they come back at hospitals like Walter Reed, they even more bear the brunt. As far as I'm concerned, it's time to bring them home. That's all the time we have, Phil. I enjoyed our debate. Folks, if you want to find out more about the Inside Scoop, go to www.radioinsidescoop.com. We're going to be playing a number of shows that you've heard before over again, including a terrific show on outsourcing. Don't miss it, radioinsidescoop.com. This is Mark Levine signing off.